You ever have one of those moments where you just know your life is about to get flipped upside down? Yeah. Well, let me tell you about the summer when my daughter Emma, 17, sweet as can be, and bald as a cue ball under her favorite pink hat, learned just how cruel a person could be. All because she got sick. I thought cancer was the worst thing a family could face, you know what I mean? Turns out the disease isn't always the villain in the story. Sometimes the real monster lives right across the street, smiling through two white teeth, handing you a welcome packet full of rules with a handshake so stiff you wonder if she's ever hugged a soul in her life. Emma was only a kid she'd been dreaming of, becoming a vet, running wild at soccer practice, shouting out answers in biology class, just the sort of girl who made the world a little lighter. Then came the cancer, like a bad joke that kept getting less funny. She lost her hair, her strength, and sometimes her hope, but she never lost her kindness. The old house we'd lived in for years started to feel haunted by all the things we used to be before doctors and IVs and nights holding her hand while she shook with fever. So when Emma said in her soft, raspy whisper, "Mom, maybe if we move, I can feel normal again," we packed up and found ourselves a fresh start in Meadowbrook Estates. Now, if you've never lived in a neighborhood like Meadowbrook, picture this cookie-cutter houses with perfect lawns, quiet streets where even the birds seem to chirp in time, everything so clean it almost hurts your eyes. Our house had blue shutters and a big window where Emma could watch the Cardinals and Blue Jays, little moments of peace in the chaos. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the place where we got our miracle. Our first morning there, the doorbell rang at 7 a.m. Emma was still asleep, her little body lost in that hospital bed we'd squeezed into her new room. I opened the door to find Margaret Silverton, president of the HOA, standing there like she owned the whole state. Blonde, manicured, wearing pearls before breakfast. She handed me a thick envelope of rules, barely pretending to smile, then leaned in and, well, her eyes darted past me, taking in the sight of Emma's oxygen machine and the beeping monitors. That smile vanished real quick. "Oh, I wasn't told there'd be medical issues," she said, voice icing over. I explained as politely as I could that Emma was just a sick kid trying to get better. Margaret's lips pinched so tight I thought they'd disappear. "This isn't a medical facility," she hissed. "Sick people can't live in residential neighborhoods. It's against the rules, permits violations, all that." I tried to reason with her, but she was already craning her neck, staring straight into Emma's room. Right then, Emma, woken by all the commotion, staggered into the hallway, gripping the wall, her pink hat off kilter. Margaret recoiled like she'd seen a ghost. "She's not contagious," I snapped as Emma's eyes filled with fear. "That's what you say," Margaret shot back, "but I read that cancer patients leak toxic chemicals from their treatments. They contaminate everything." Completely insane, but said with enough confidence to make you question yourself for half a second. I told her to leave, but she got the last word in. "This conversation isn't over. You can't turn our beautiful neighborhood into a cancer ward." She clicked away, heels stabbing at the pavement. "You'd think that'd be the end, right? Just a bad first impression? Maybe she'd soften up." Nope. The next morning, the medical truck came to deliver Emma's oxygen tanks, was in and out in 10 minutes, no fuss. But Margaret, spying from her front window, flew out of her house, hair bouncing like she was in a shampoo commercial, screaming at the delivery guy, "You can't park that thing here." The poor man was just doing his job, trying to explain that the supplies kept Emma alive, but Margaret, with her arms crossed, told him then she should live somewhere designed for sick people. Emma watched all this from the window, her eyes wide and scared. She whispered, "Maybe we should move again." It just kept getting worse. Margaret complained about the nurses, said they were tracking germs through the neighborhood, complained about the oxygen machine too loud at night, complained about Emma sitting by the window, said she ruined the neighborhood aesthetic. Emma tried to make herself small, turning down her oxygen at night, staying inside, asking the nurses to park around the corner. But nothing worked. Margaret's crusade grew louder until 3 weeks in, she called a neighborhood meeting a community health and safety discussion. She invited every family on the street. Emma insisted on going. "Maybe if they see I'm not dangerous, they'll understand," she said. She put on her pink hat and a shaky smile, and I wheeled her down to the community center, her hands trembling in her lap. Margaret, standing at the front like a headmistress, started her presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen, our neighborhood faces a serious health crisis. She flashed a giant picture of our house with Emma's oxygen tank in clear view right on the big screen. "This is what cancer looks like in a residential community," she announced. "Medical waste, dangerous chemicals, disease contamination." Emma just shrank down, her eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall. Margaret spun lie after lie, said property values dropped 40% when cancer patients moved in, that cancer could spread genetically and environmentally, that Emma's equipment was poisoning the neighborhood. "Once you have cancer, you always have cancer," she told the room, and I swear a few people actually nodded along. Emma, shaking but determined, asked if she could speak. She pushed herself up in her chair and said, "My name is Emma. I didn't choose to get cancer. It just happened. I'm not dangerous. I just want to live quietly and get better." For a second, you could feel the whole room soften, like they were seeing her for the first time. Mrs. Chin from down the street was crying. But Margaret wasn't done. She snapped, "That's exactly the problem. You belong in a hospital, not a home next to healthy families." Mr. Davis tried to speak up, but Margaret shut him down. She started showing studies that said living near cancer patients made healthy people sick, called Emma a walking health hazard, even claimed her chemotherapy was poisoning the soil and water. It was all nonsense, but she said it so forcefully that a vote was called. Should we be allowed to stay, or should Emma be forced out? 28 families voted for us to leave. Only 12 said we could stay. Emma broke down sobbing so hard her little body shook. That night, the stress sent her back to the hospital. "Maybe she's right, Mom," Emma whispered. "Maybe I don't belong here." I was out of answers. Margaret doubled down, sending health patrols to watch our house, filing complaints, even calling Child Protective Services and the fire department. Every accusation, a lie. Every investigation, pure torture for Emma. She got sicker, started to lose hope. "I can't fight cancer." And Mrs. Silverton, at the same time, she told me one morning, "I'm too tired." That was the moment something snapped in me. See, Margaret Silverton didn't know who she was really picking a fight with. She had no idea I was Judge Sarah Mitchell, a federal judge, just using my maiden name at home. Margaret wanted a legal fight. She was about to get the courtroom battle of her life. When the HOA sued us, yeah, she really tried to take us to court for public health endangerment. The case landed on my desk by pure chance. Margaret had no idea who the judge was. Tuesday morning, the day of the hearing, I put on my robe and walked into that courtroom, hands shaking. Emma wheeled in looking so fragile, my husband by her side. Margaret was dressed like she was going to a funeral, confidence dripping from every pore. Her lawyer barely got 2 words out before Margaret jumped up, demanding immediate action, calling Emma a biological weapon who should be locked away in medical isolation facilities. Then she pointed at Emma, my baby girl, shaking and sobbing in her wheelchair, and screamed, "If I were a judge, I'd give her the death penalty." That was it. I stood up, took off my mask, figuratively and literally, and said, "Did you just demand the death penalty for my daughter?" The whole room went dead quiet. "Emma Thompson is my daughter," I said. "I am Judge Sarah Mitchell, and you just demanded the death penalty for my child." Margaret went white as a sheet. Her lawyer sat down, knowing the battle was lost. Margaret stammered that I couldn't judge the case. "You're right," I said. "I'll recuse myself. But before I go, I want everyone here to know something." I looked straight at Margaret, letting the weight of 23 years on the federal bench fill my voice. "I have seen murderers, terrorists, and human traffickers, but I have never seen anyone as evil as you, Mrs. Silverton. You demanded the death penalty for a teenager fighting cancer. The only diseased thing in this courtroom is your soul." I stepped down, knelt by Emma, and told her, "Nothing she said is true. You're perfect, just the way you are." Emma, voice barely above a whisper, turned to Margaret and said, "I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to let hate destroy my heart." The whole room fell silent as Margaret collapsed, sobbing, finally realizing what she'd done. In the end, a different judge took over. Margaret was charged with federal disability discrimination, kicked off the HOA board, fined, and arrested. The neighborhood changed. People started supporting each other, organizing meal trains and rides for families with sick kids. But the real change was in Emma. She found her voice, her pride, her purpose. 6 months later, Emma was in remission. She started a support group for teenage cancer patients, gave speeches at hospitals, raised money for research, and every time someone tried to make a sick person feel small, Emma was there to remind them, every life matters, dignity is non-negotiable, and love always beats hate. So now I gotta ask, what do you think? who really belongs in a community, and who gets to decide where's the line between rules and compassion? Share your thoughts down below. And hey, if you've ever stood up for someone who couldn't fight back, let's hear about it, because the world could always use a little more courage.